actually.
I'm not done yet. Any more questions? Come on in. You with your question. I'll come back to you.
You've written the episode to Baltimore, which is a gaming thing. Have you ever been involved in gaming? I mean, it wasn't just that you were given the whole concept of the world, but how I could play with that one.
I've been, among my many strings to my team bow, I've been a game player since. Yeah, I mean, role-playing games, war games, that kind of thing. When the Warhammer 40,000 game came out, that was back in the I think it was. And I used to play that, and I had my collection of miniatures, which were really badly painted. That's why I like role-playing better, because you never invest all the time and energy and splash stuff around. Yeah, you got it. Green soldier. But yeah, I knew the Warhammer world because I played it. I still have a box of Space Marine miniatures somewhere in my cupboard. I should really dig those out, actually. Maybe I shouldn't, because I really did them out and go, my God, what were you thinking? Did it look like a, big broad paper. But I knew the world, and I was aware that they were doing stuff with the Warhammer line. And a guy I knew, writing that I knew, who I didn't really have a lot of respect for, was saying, oh yes, I've just done a story for this worm thing, and I was like, oh yeah, they do stories. And I thought, if he can write one, what's going to be? And I went back and read the stuff, and I thought, this is pretty cool. Because again, as I was saying earlier about how it's a world, it's not a world and characters. There are characters in it, but it's largely, you have a wider palette than you do if you're doing say a TV show. And that started appealing to me. I was a fan of the Frank Herbert book, that kind of gothic sci-fi universe. I quite like that sort of texture. And basically I just went to them and said, can I do your story? And I did a couple of short stories for them. And they liked them enough, they called me back in after the session. I went, right, got your book. And away I went. So I was really pleased about getting in and doing that kind of stuff. It's great fun. It's like the Warhammer universe is kind of Catholic knights in space. Nobody speaks, everyone declares. Sort of shouting, and guess what? Things explode. So it's a lot of fun to run the Warhammer universe. In fact, yesterday I was at the Games Workshop store with Stan and Plymouth to do a signing. Besieged by guys going, what's going to happen next in the next book? Oh, you guys, just you wait. It's going to be stuck exploding. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Did I ask you a question? Or did I just do
you ever use guns to decide the outcome of your story?
I've never been painted that far before. That'd be interesting to do. Suddenly, they fell in love.
So you have more Warhammer?
Yeah, I've written so far 4 Warhammer 40,000 novels. I did Dancing Color and Dancing Sanguines, which are duology books about Blood Angel, Space Marine. And I wrote Faith and Fire, which is about the Sisters of Battle, which for those of you who don't know, are basically nuns with guns. Big nuns with big guns. I had a hard time selling that idea actually, because the Warhammer games are largely aimed at kind of 14-year-old boys. They're aimed at... Most of the age group are teenage boys who haven't quite discovered girls yet, and think they're slightly inky, but like nihilistic heavy metal music and things exploding, shouting and hollering. So that's the kind of age group we go for. There's not a lot of sex in the Warhammer book, but there's a lot of violence. And I said to them, let's do the nuns with guns stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, but our audience is teenage boys. And I'm like, yeah. We haven't shown it yourself. I'm like, has he been to any of this knowledge? All normal teenage boys, girls with guns, do the math. And they came out and they were like, this isn't really good. It's great, because whenever I do a book signing, whenever people come up, after Faith and Fire came out, that was kind of book. Guys would come up to me with it and they go, I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 pieces. My girlfriend doesn't understand it, but I bought this for her, so thanks. So I give my girlfriend, look, it's got a woman on it, darling. or it would be goth chicks coming up to me going, thanks for doing book with women. It's like, yeah, great. People saying, there aren't any women writers writing for the Warhammer land. because it is very global. But I feel, I feel I'm a compliment to the right ladies. I think I can do it, I mean, I write about aliens from outer space, I can write about Vulcans and Klingons. I'm not one of them either, I think I can write about women. And hopefully, I'm going to go back and do another Sisters Battle, because, just kick-ass page with rocket launches. It's just so fun to do. And then beyond that, I did want to show you Flight of the Eisenstein, which is part of the Horus Heresy series, which is a kind of spin-off from the main Warhammer lines. It's basically the history of this huge event in the past of the Warhammer universe that's been kind of stranded in myth and legend for years and years. And we're doing those, and those are done very, very well. It's an explosion of the shells. And right now, I'm just starting writing, going back to the Blood Angels guys that I did 3 years ago. I'm going to be doing the duology of novels there. And what I'm doing right now is the Red Fury. It's basically Die Hard in a monastery. So I find an excuse to have someone say yippee-ki anyway.
Ties in quite well. Listen to Ian Watson at a recent convention talking about his entertaining experiences writing Warhammer 40k. Is there a big list of thou shalt not starting with Ian Watson?
Ian's books are really good. Ian did this trilogy called The Inquisition War. But he also wrote the very first Space Marine book, which is called Space Marine, which is tragedy, myth and legend of Warhammer HQ because of the stuff in the thinly veiled homoeroticism that he wrote. Space Marine
things really,
it's got Space Marine called Biff. That's the joke. It's got these Space Marines in the locker room twanging each other, going, "Ha ha, yes, look at my neatness." I'm not going there. So I think we don't have. There isn't like a kind of list of thou shalt nots, but there's kind of like an unwritten one of stuff. Thou shalt not have a Space Marine called Biff. It's funny. They said to me, no homoeroticism. When I was writing Fate of Fire, feel free to kind of hit the lesbian stuff. What do you think? You're obviously yeah, I mean, it's like with any sort of time universe, really. It's more about, do you get the texture of it, right? You know what I mean? Like Space Marines would not sort of like, walk in the room and say, "Oh, that's bait and shit." Space Marines would go, "Yo, I demand beef!" Bang on the table and break something, So it's all about the question of, getting the smell, the texture, and the sense of the world, right? Because if you don't, I've read so many times on this where it's like, have you ever watched this show? I always go back to this terrible TNG novel I read one time. I'm not going to name names, that would be unprofessional. Grounded by David Bishop. It was a really great idea about this, about having, there's something going on with the crew of the Enterprise being split in different directions, but the guy didn't really seem like he read the show, or if it was like he was, he had a completely different idea, maybe it's just me, but he had a completely different idea of the way the characters were, and the voices just did not sound right to me. And I've come across that 2 or 3 times reading other times. This just does not feel right. And if it doesn't sound like those characters, you trip over them. Oh yeah. The new voice.
They had 2 novels and the express purpose was to have great ladies and put some something like that, flying his eyes out. And I thought, what? Yeah. I can't remember. Well, I started to look up you want turkey, I'll bring them next year. Dead turkey. Oh yeah.
There's a book that came out.
And it just was not. It was like some pseudo-sexual, pseudo-cowboy thing that was going on at the time, it's like we've been having the spiritual beings now, and actually look at it. It's all about subjugation and it's very brave character.
There's a book that's come out recently called Voyages of Imagination. It's basically kind of like an episode going to the Star Trek novels, written by the Jeff Ayres. And he basically went around the many Star Trek runners and he interviewed Archie Cold. And it's interesting that when you read some of the interviews in the book, some of them like the one I did was basically, I've written Star Trek, I'm really happy to be here, a lot of them are like that. And then there are some writers, I won't name names, who were like, our books cure cancer. It's like, okay. So, I don't don't know, some people have a very different view of what they think the show should be about. I think that any kind of tie-in, mission of any tie-in is to make you feel like, if it's a TV show, it should feel like a TV show, but you should act, on one level you should say, this feels like something I could watch on television. On another level you have to say, but much bigger. Like when I wrote Halcyon, there's huge, great big battle sequences and massive sort of gothic cities, the kind of stuff that would have just completely blown their entire budget for the series if they'd tried to do it on TV, or it would have just looked crap. But it's still got the kind of same character interaction story you get and stuff like that. That's what I'm saying, okay, but now I've got a book, I can do it against this huge background of stuff that you've never seen anywhere else. And I think the book needs to kind of marry those two elements together. You know, if you were writing a Star Wars novel, Star Wars has epic scope. So you would have to have, you would have to have a book that would give you epic scope as well as the kind of person that's all the same character. Is that right? I'm going to jump on the subject. I'm just rambling.
No, you're all right. Carry on.
I started talking about this and now I'm...
You're into it. Some interesting things to explore. Have you ever been near a film or a series like you've been used to making, where you've been allowed to hang out with the guys that actually do the explosions?
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing a lot of the German stuff, I've always enjoyed talking to the crew. And you chatted yesterday about how the crew, you can't bullshit the crew. That's what's great. You hang out with the crew guys and you go, so the director of cocaine? Yeah. Yeah, he's sleeping with her, and that guy's doing this. Whenever I used to go on the set to do stuff, I would go and talk to the PR person, and they would give me the sort of like the party line, and then I go and talk to one of the effects guys, what's the movie going on? Oh, it's terrible, it's all going horribly wrong. I wouldn't usually write that in my article, but it would give you a great idea about the way that the situation was. There was a movie I was on, Wing Commander. That was over in Holland. No, it's not Holland, it's in Luxembourg. That was a lot of fun. That was this mad sort of multicultural set. They had, I can remember it now, they had an English director, a French director of photography, an American producer, and then they had a crew from Holland, Germany, Italy, and Spain in Luxembourg. So it was like, anyway, it was this disused munitions factory that turned into sort of like a plastic photocopy. And they cleared it all out. It was really cleverly done. They had this great big huge long sort of hallway, and they optically doubled it to make it look like the interior of this space aircraft carrier. And I remember sort of wandering around there. I was looking around, and they just said to me, hey, feel free to wander around, take pictures. Right now, I was there for 2 days just to cover the show. And I got talking to some of the special effects guys, and they had a whole sort of hangar for themselves. They had these rocket launchers. They had AK-47 rifles that they built with these cladding around, so they could use actual guns, but make them look sort of like a sci-fi weapon. These armoured personnel carriers, and, loads of really cool big boys. And I walked in there. This guy comes up to me. And he looks at me in that kind of like, and I can see he's thinking, what country are you from? And I can't remember. I think I spoke to him in very, very bad German. And he's like saying, and he says back to me, he said like, parlez vous français? I'm like, sprechen Sie Deutsch? And I went, yeah. And so he's talking to me, and I'm trying to say in German, I am a journalist. I have come from the land of England. Talk about your flying film. And he's going, yes, but your German is not good. Do you speak Spanish? No. Do you speak Dutch? No. We were just sitting for about 5 minutes. Funny, went, shit. And I went, are you English? He went, yeah. Are you? Stop, he went, do you feel as big a twat as I do? Come on in there. He showed me around, and he showed me around, David, he said, you're on trial with these now. I'll just stay here for the rest of the day. But yeah, the crew always a lot of fun. Those are the guys who are really down at the sharp end. People like Jasper, who would see the ugly side of stuff, but also quite honest. And I find that really refreshing because I was always one of those kids who likes to know how the magician's tricks are done, and I never lose any I don't lose any of my love for film and television because I can see through it. If anything, actually, I love it even more because you realise how much work, how much effort goes. You see that one shot, you think, wow, that's brilliant. Or even a shot that you see that isn't particularly brilliant, just something that zips right past you and you think, it registers with you as a film viewer, but if you know about the way these things are made, you think, wow, do I have to put all that effort in just for 10 seconds of the thing zipping you past my view? And I appreciate it even more, I guess. And yeah, the crew great. Yes, Jackson. Thank you.
Great portion of going around the Simpson Lex. Actually got on the bridge of the Lex.
She's standing in the middle.
I did that, yes.
Yeah.
I had to have something to eat, I'm quite sure the national spine, but anyway, long story short, I was absolutely fascinated to find that the pilot on the Lex actually made a bubble wrap. A great big bubble wrap, beautifully formed, straight. This is the second series, that's not the first one, when one's up going on to Ginger. It was a massive set, it was fascinating to see how they managed to put such everyday materials and make it look so damn good.
Yeah.
Babylon 5 is very good.
That was the original Klingon bubbles, or bubble wrap, yeah?
On Band 5, one of the things that was amazing about that show is that they pulled in a show that looked as good on a budget as small as they had. I remember the first time I went out to the set where they filmed Babylon 5 was on this, it was a warehouse that used to make kind of swimming pool motors, cleaning motors, in the middle of this horrific gangbanger district, right out in the middle of nowhere, right outside LA. I remember getting in a taxi and saying, "Can you take me here?" Because like, "Are you quite sure, white boy?" Yeah, it's like it's the middle of this Hispanic gangbanger. I'm driving along the street, this guy's on the corner, so I was like, "You need some teriyaki crack, man?" "No, I'm fine." "It's all right, man." You go out in the middle of nowhere and they had this great big sign, the Bullhorns crossing sign. And inside the studio, they had these sets that were, they weren't exactly wobbly, but they were quite obviously made of cardboard. But you look at the show and they look great. And it's down to the fact that they had a crackerjack director of photography, and this guy would just light it such a way to make it really realistic. And you had the remember the main drag down the cycle, you needed a corridor that arch away. And I was standing right at the far end, and there's this sort of thing, wow, that's really cool. They do the sets where they foreshorten them, so the size of the set changes to make it look like it's going. And there's a couple, a Centauri couple standing. When I get it here, I realise it's Ken and Barbie. The costumes made little Centauri. The little Centauri here, a little ball Barbie in a shape pinned to the wall. So if you ever watch that show, you see these couple hats and they're like this, that's Barbie and Ken. And it's all, and the set's all sort of like cardboard and balsa wood. And I stood in, where Ivana was standing by the biggest, where the windows would open up, and she was standing there with the console, like, open the Babylon 5. When you actually do stand there, what you see is kind of like plumbing pipes and bits of plastic and cardboard. It looks really, really crap. When you're actually sort of like this close to it, it looks terrible. But the magic of it is what these guys did with it on screen. They light it the right way, they just tweak it with a few special effects, and you think, wow, in outer space, it really looks, they really set up there. It's remarkable, like you say, bubble wrap. There was plenty of bubble wrap on the White Star. What else did I use? Those cardboard, not cardboard, those expanded polystyrene boxes of Burgess Company, like that. They had thousands of those all over the wall, so you couldn't lean against the wall. Tube-shaped hole. Sorry. That's the thing. When I was on the Voyager stand stage, they said, "Don't lean on the walls, because they're really badly balanced." And I did it without thinking. I was like, next question.
Were the Kazon the worst mistake in Star Trek history? Because in Voyager, what I thought the most underused and most menacing and potential race were the Vidians, the race that had the highest organs and they had no choice, and where they could have taken it, yet you have Klingons with a bad hair day.
Do you know what they use for the hair? Dog chew toys. The thing about Kazon, it's like a lot of things.
I mean, would you write a story with the Vidians or not?
Yeah, I mean, the Deans are interesting. The problem with Voyager was the way the show was constructed is because it's an Odyssey story, you can't have the same characters. Yeah, they went into the Dean space with a couple of Deans, and then they've gone. So you couldn't really, I mean, you know, you have to change what the Deans were to have them being going back. But yeah, they were a good villain. I mean, I can't remember the episode, the one where they split the laboratories into a Klingon and human, which is a dumb idea. Yeah. But there's a really great little subplot with Carey, the engineer on the ship, who gets captured with her, and the Dean comes in and he's wearing the guy's face, which is really quite nasty. That was the best bit in the entire episode. The rest of it was really nasty. But I don't mean that. It was great. I loved it. But yeah, I thought the Deans were interesting. The thing about the Kazon is the Kazon stem out of what was going on in the real world when they were writing the pilot episode of Star Trek. Star Trek has always been, I talked about the fifth day, the reflection, the funhouse mirror that reflects the real world. Deep Space Nine, you know, Deep Space Nine begins with them going onto the space station and the place is a complete wreck. That was written during the LA riots. So the guys who were writing that were looking out of the window and seeing their city completely wrecked by people, and they were thinking, well, you know, we've never seen that in Star Trek, so why don't we start from the same place? And when the Voyager pilot, the caretaker, was being written, one of the circumstances that was going on in LA at the same time was the gang problem was getting really, really epidemic levels. And that's what the Kazon was supposed to be. The Kazon was supposed to be the Crips and the Bloods in space. Because you had this idea about you had the Kazon Ogla and the Kazon this and the Kazon that. There would be these different factions fighting against each other. And it would be, you know, so it was going to be kind of homeboys in space with these, you know, these kind of vigilante gang groups, which I thought was a really cool idea, but it didn't really pay off very well. Because in the end, it became a kind of slightly more pastiche of the Klingons. But if you look, you can still see some of the episodes. There's that one that has the guy who played Nog, I can't remember his name, but he plays the Kazon connection, where he has to go off and prove himself on this desert planet, and Chakotay gets stuck with him and then he knows he's amazing. That's very much influenced on the whole gang culture thing about, you know, how you get jumped in, you have to, you know, go and rob somebody. That same sort of parallel that they were trying to show. It's a shame they didn't really pay out for those films. But yes, I agree with you. The Deans were yes.
So if you've got a lot of taking stuff from screen, playing with the toys and writing, what have you read that you'd like to see on screen?
I'd like to see a really good adaptation of the Gibson novel. You know, there's a lot of great stuff that he wrote. Neuromancer was very strong. So just keep me in my mind. I'd like to see a movie of that. I read recently Richard Morgan's books, kind of James Bond in space. Yeah, Alton Carver. That was brilliant. I mean, that was a friend of mine bought that. He said, we were in a bookstore. And he said, you know about books? It's a thing, isn't it? You know, it's good. I said, well, that's quite good. Alton Carver. 3 days later, he turned up on my doorstep and went, read this. And just left. And he was right, it was really good. It's a really sort of visceral action adventure kind of thing. It's a no-brainer when you think about it. Let's do James Bond in space. He does a really good job of it. So I'd like to see a movie of that. I've heard that Joel Silver in going down the Matrix and things has picked up the rights to it, but it's such a kind of action-packed, high-tensile, explosive kind of dynamic story. I don't know. So yeah, tell it as well. Yeah, I'd like to see a movie of that. And then maybe some of the classic stuff, you know, why haven't we seen a Ringworld feature film? I'd love to see that. Because you did that now, people go, well, it's like Halo. There's so many great old movies. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I'd love to see a movie of that. That's been talked about for years. After Star Trek Troopers, some movies Highlander was got option. And Moon was supposed to be the next thing that come out. And that never happened.
Time on spin.
And I'd like to see some decent third-page adaptations as well. There's been a few cases, some better than others. And there's so many great short stories that he wrote that, you know, just crying out for adaptation. So many that have been optioned. You know, every now and then one trickles down and please let this one not be crap. And, you know, more often than not I'm not rewarded. But, yeah, there's so many great stories out there.
I thought Ian Banks is considered Cleaver's.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you saw that one.
South London.
Yeah, how can you do that? I I don't know, the thing is about the culture books are brilliant, but that would have to be a mini-series, wouldn't it? You know, just each book. Yeah, I really enjoyed those books. It's a friend of mine, the same guy who brought Awesome Cars, my friend Adam. Was a huge fan of the culture books, kept on banging on about how brilliant they are. So just to shut him up, I reckon, instead of believing him. I'll borrow the rest of the series, I reckon. Yeah, Max has got some really great ideas. I think, you know, what I love about the culture books is it's kind of a Star Trek universe of the dial turned up to 11. You know, so where would you like to live? Star Trek universe or the culture universe? The culture, because they got more cool stuff. I mean, guns and drugs and things that blow up. That's much more sexy than the Star Trek. The Star Trek universe, you have to be a good boy, but in the culture universe, you can just be naughty. It's much more. Anybody else?
Something more hammers. Strict guideline you give us all. You cannot say or you cannot do.
Oh, we were talking about this earlier. Not really, for the Warhammer books, not really that much. Again, it's, as I said before, it's a question of getting the sort of tone right. I mean, I think what they want is they want writers who know the universe well enough to already know what they got. I mean, if you went in there and you picked, you know, I'm going to resurrect the Emperor of Mankind and blow up sort of planet Earth, they show you the door straight away. You know, they need to have people who already know what you can't do, because otherwise, you know, you can go off the deep end. A lot of fanfic writers say to me, you know, what you do really is a lot different from what we do. No, what I do is I have to work inside the box. You know, one of the great strengths about writing fanfic is that you can do whatever you like. So, for example, if you want to bring, you know, a dead character back to life, it's because you happen to like them. You don't really have to bother explaining how it happens. I want to write a story, say Stargate. You want to write a story about Janet Fraser. What Janet Fraser is still like in season 10 and hanging out with Cameron Mitchell. You can just write that. You don't have to come up with a convoluted excuse to do it. I couldn't do that because I have to work inside the framework. You know, if you wanted to put characters in a different milieu, if you wanted to bring characters from a different series across the way, fan fiction is great for that. But if you want to write a professional time story, you have to follow the same guidelines that the people who are actually writing the real show, writing the real material, follow. In fact, sometimes we get tougher restrictions even than they do. I've just finished doing a Doctor Who novel that's coming out for Christmas, and there were a few things in there. I've just been going through the proofs. You know, Big Gay Russell, you love Big Gay Russell. Cardiff's been going through, you know, ticking on what you can and can't do. And there are 2 or 3 things they asked me to take out of the book, which they've done on the TV show. And I was like, well, sit down on telly. Like, yeah, but you're a book. This is TV. TV trumps novels. So we get to do it. You get to shut and go back to work. It's a book. My call, you know. So there are restrictions. It varies from project to project. You know, some things are so restricted that you never actually get to do them. Did I talk about the Firefly book? Yesterday? Simon Schuster, who produced the Star Trek books, we're going to do a series of Firefly books. They released the novelisation of the pilot of the feature film, Serenity. And there was a lot of interest, mostly from the guys who were writing the Star Trek. They go, wow, Serenity! Oh, we love this character. Brilliant. And I was one of them going, me. And we were putting a lot of pitches for these 2 slots, which went to Joss Whedon, and they sat on his desk and they saved it. And a year later, when the option for the contract ran out, he started looking. And the reason for that is because he decided he didn't want anybody else. He was going to take his ball and let everybody else play. You can't get a stronger restriction than that. You know, I was a bit sad about that because I really, really liked that show. I loved those characters. Absolutely love to do that, and I think I would have done it hand on heart with Spanish love, and I wouldn't have used it.
I love it because I was so few of them. The breeds taking that and run it.
But sadly, you know, it was Joss's world, it was his character, and I can't fault him for that. You know, he decided that he wants to tell that story. Whether he's going to tell any more, that's what makes me sad. You know, if you're not going to let anybody else tell the story, you better do it. But whether he does or not, I don't know. But that's an example. That's an extreme example of the kind of restrictions that exist. There are other shows where I really like it, you know, which is going too far the other way. Ideally, what you need on any kind of time is you need somebody who knows the franchise really well, somebody who doesn't have an axe to grind, somebody who, you know, likes everything about it. I mean, I worked on the Judge Dredd audio dramas. I pitched one story idea which was involved clones and time travel. And the guy who was line editor said to me, I don't like clones, I don't like time travel. I said, well, but this is a perfectly good story. No, I don't like those two elements, so I'm not going to pass this. And that wasn't that I'd written a bad story, it was just that he decided he didn't like those because he's in charge. I had to do what he said. Whereas with the Star Trek books, there's Marco Palmieri, who's line editor, and Paul Block, who works at Paramount. Paul's job is Marco edits the books and is a science fiction fan and Star Trek fan. Paula works at Paramount. Her job is to make sure that you dot every I and cross every T. She's a Star Trek fan as well. And they give you a lot of leeway to tell stuff in the Star Trek universe, but they have a very strong understanding of what is Trek. So, you know, this would not work. Spock would not say this. This is not the way Klingon would talk. This kind of thing is going to impact with other books that we're doing. So they have a very good, very strong knowledge of the way the Star Trek universe works. It's great to have something like that because, you know, you can lean on them to write them and say, you know, we want this kind of story. And if you're all fans, you all end up sort of swimming in the same direction, and the book becomes a hell of a lot better than what it would be if it was just, you know, people being pulled apart across books. I think I've got time for one more.
There's a little bit of intrigue about the idea of reimagining later. But much of the background got mapped up. As an example, you mentioned Liberator. I gather that when they came to make the graphic model kit of Liberator, they realised that no one had any idea how big it was and real life.
We've got a lot of background. Ben Aranovich, who's a series scripter. Ben's a role player as well. And you know what it's like when you're a role player. When you develop your background for a role playing game, you'll come up with all of the sort of source material about where the planets are, how many moons they've got, how big the ships are, how many guns they've got, you know, what kind of bullets this weapon will fire. Ben has a huge file, this thick, full of that kind of stuff. We have a consultant, a friend of mine, John Chapman, who's our astronomical consultant, so we can make sure that all of the planets we're talking about are actually directly, really and truly in relation to each other. You know the software Celestia? Have you ever heard of that? It's a computer program that simulates the movement of planets and stars, and we've been using that. Okay, if we say we're going to Rigel, it really will take this long to get there with the kind of hyperdrive engines we've got. You know? So we've written all of this background material. Ben could, if he typed it up, release that as a role play. There's that much source material in there, so definitely we've been doing a lot of background stuff we don't even need to talk about. So why do we need to know what people eat? Why do you want to come use what kind of food somebody eats? We've got the huge background about the structure of the Federation, what Earth's like in the future, weapons, technology, clothing, all of that material has all been done by Ben. It's almost obsessive compulsive, which is great because as writers, he's given us a really rich background to draw from. So yeah, there's a lot of background stuff. How much of it will turn up in the show, I guess, depends on what kind of stories we write. I mean, I think it's important that you don't sacrifice drama for the sake of, a piddling bit of sort of techno code. Because at the end of the day, it's a story about people. It's not a story about how fast the ship goes or what it's, how many cannons it's got. I mean, it's funny to put that kind of stuff in. At the end of the day, any good story has to serve the drama. But yes, answer yes. Well, thank you very much. It's been really great to be here. I really appreciate you guys being so cool. And as I finish, let me say, I also have copies of books, so feel free to pop around if you have time. Thank you.